is because our guest for this evening reminded me that many years ago, when she was a undergrad student and I was just starting out as a new doctor in psychology, she took one of my classes. And these ideas that she's going to be talking about were birthed in class with me. I had nothing to do with it, but I feel like I'm a part of the journey because she started thinking about this in class. So I'm excited to have Dr. Alexis Davis with us today. Alexis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. First of all, thanks Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals for inviting me to be on the Mindful Minute Conversation series. My name's Dr. Alexis Davis from Kansas City, Missouri. I'll start with Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals to kind of talk about myself in a roundabout way. Okay. So as a student at Philander, in undergrad, I was a student member of Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals. So when I went away to school, I knew that I wanted to be a psychologist, but I didn't really know what it meant to say, like, I want to be a psychologist and what that means to be a Black female and like all the identities that I bring to the field of psychology. And so AABPP really helped me hone in on like all of the things that I'm interested in, gave me representation. Like Dr. Haynes said, I took her experimental psychology class my senior year, and that really cemented like research. So who I am, I'm a healer. I'm a lover of life. I love to meditate. I love to do holistic things and learn about African spirituality. I like to say that I'm just like many things. So introducing myself is always like interesting because I don't know what part is gonna come out, but I'm many things. I like to get my Erykah Badu on it, accept all parts of me. So
see, she already getting deep. We ain't even started with Erykah Badu on. So the title of our conversation today is Hip Hop and Mindfulness and Healing. And so we don't often see that combination of words put together a whole lot. And so can you talk a little bit to us about, you talked about you got involved in psychology. How did you get this interest in hip hop and mindfulness? How did that come about? What's the journey to that?
Okay. So I have a podcast, Black Jewel, look, side pub. And it started with hip hop in terms of my love for hip hop. That started when I was about 8 years old. Music has always been a very large part of my life, my family. I mean, most Black families surround themselves around music. We know Saturday morning when those old school tunes come up, it's time to start cleaning up. So, there's different things and connections between us of African descent with music. Mine started like very specifically at 8 years old with rap music. Little Kim is one of my favorite female MCs. And the first song of hers that I remember hearing is The Quiet Storm. So Mobb Deep, The Quiet Storm remix. And so when she said, hot damn ho, here we go again. And I was like, oh my God, first of all, like that voice, because my voice is kind of deep and raspy and I could do like different octaves. So when I first heard her voice, it stood out to me because it sounded like mine. And then she was just bold and like very like direct. And I mean, people could say other adjectives as well. For me, I think it helped me see that all Black women can have a voice and we get to find what that voice means. Like grown me looking back at 8-year-old me. So that really just led me into this whole evolution of like rap music. Me and my sister, we were just talking about this when I was home. We would sit in our rooms and just listen to lyrics and listen to music and listen to music. And most oftentimes it reflected what we were going through. It helped us like facilitate conversation with each other. Me and my friends, we would always be asking, have you heard this new song? Have you heard Lil Wayne's new mixtape? Like that was the big thing. Or, all the different artists that came out along my journey growing up. So hip hop really has helped me along my development. It's given me words at times when I didn't have words. It's given me expressions and feelings at times when I couldn't pinpoint them for myself. And then the psychology aspect. I've always been interested in like what makes people do the things that they do and how do people deal with life after they've experienced certain circumstances. So putting those two together for me kind of collided when, again, like my senior year. It happened a little bit before a couple summers before. I did an internship, and one of who's now like a longtime friend, he was in sociology, and he was studying hip hop, but more so from a sociological lens. And we were just talking about our passions. And I, at that time, was doing like severe mental illness research, substance use. And so I was just talking to him, and I started thinking like, well, hip hop is really my passion. And that's the language I speak with like all of my friends. And from there, it just started like, I think the thoughts just started embedding like, well, how has hip hop helped me heal along my journey? How have I used lyrics as affirmations or mantras? How have I, and so then I just started looking at my friends, and it's like, oh, okay, this is how we're healing. And I just wanted to use that when I went to graduate school, and that's the research that I did. So that is how all of that happened, merging hip hop with mental health in terms of my story. But it's nothing new, right? This is something we've been doing since the existence of hip hop culture and rap music specifically as a subculture. So I think that it's mindful for us as people of African descent to also give ourselves credit that this is a way that we've been healing ourselves for a very long time. And I'm proud of us for that.
That's such an amazing point. I think that when you said it, when you were like, how many times I've used lyrics as mantras or affirmations as a part of my journey, and I would have never really put that together until you just said it. So that's so amazing at how we use music, the words that are in the music, how we express ourselves, and how we use that as a part of the healing process. And so you described yourself earlier as a healer. You're like, I am a healer. And so tell me what that means. Because we're talking about healing process and you being a healer. So what do you see the healing process being? What's your role as a healer? Tell us what that means.
Okay. So when I think of healer, I think of someone who is for the liberation of life and the liberation of the African psyche. And I can even make that general to the group that they've identified as their tribe. For me, it's people of African descent. So the healing process for me, how I've been trained, how I have grown to learn, is really to strip ourselves of some things that maybe do not serve us well, strip and internalize oppression, and really going through a process of identifying who we are as individuals and collectively from a truth standpoint, right? So we know the African proverb, if the story is always told from the hunter's perspective, then the huntee will never have a story. So it's important that we are able to tell our story. So the healing process for me looks like recreating a narrative, recreating your narrative, placing your story in your thriving narrative and not necessarily in this happened to me. Everything we experience happens for us. So that's what I think the healing process looks like. And that's really, if we look at it, that's like the hip hop process, embracing yourself. If you look at the pillars of hip hop, knowledge of self, DJing, MCing, all those pillars are pretty much pillars for the healing process, pillars of life. You must know yourself in order to share yourself with people. You must share your word, be impeccable with your word. That's rapping. You must know how to dig within yourself and mix all of those parts of yourself to showcase the most beautiful aspect of yourself. That's DJing. And so the healing process to me just looks like living out loud, growing out loud, and using those components along the way.
I love when you said stripping yourself of those narratives that no longer serve you. I knew you was gonna be deep today. I should have had my pen and paper out, ready to write stuff down. I hope everybody who's watching this is writing stuff down. The healing process is really us living out loud and stripping ourselves of narratives that no longer serve us. So you talked about your journey with hip hop and how you started getting interested in that. But if we're listening to you right now, what is it that we should be taking home about how we can use hip hop as a part of our healing process?
Right. So that's great. So that's where these 6 steps that came to mind after doing research on hip hop and mental health through my dissertation, doing some groups, pilot groups through different college counseling centers and programs. These 6 steps stood out through that research, interaction with students that really help us in terms of shifting our mindset to utilize hip hop for healing. The first step is to accept that there's oppression and privilege. I think a lot of the debate about hip hop culture, and I want to take a moment to really put a pinpoint there and distinguish something according to my theory, because according to other hip hopologists, you're going to hear a different theory and definition of hip hop and rap music. So let me put that out there as well. Throughout this talk, I'm going to say hip hop and I'm going to say rap music. Hip hop is the culture from which rap music derives. So hip hop is the overall, like the DJing together, the rap music, the knowledge of self. That's the total sum being, right? And then rap music is a subculture of that culture. So that's how I distinguish it. So it's important to accept that there's oppression and privilege in hip hop culture and rap music specifically, because we all have oppression and privilege within ourselves. And so that goes to the second, which is identifying your oppression and privilege. We all have that. And sometimes it gets uncomfortable to identify with our oppression and our privilege. Both can be uncomfortable. And we both have that. And so earlier I was going to say that's where a lot of the debate about hip hop and rap music comes in, because if you talk to a lot of people who maybe are golden era hip hop heads, right? They're going to say, oh, now that mumbo rap, it doesn't talk about anything. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't have a message, right? And if you talk to maybe some Gen Z babies, they may say, well, the message was a little slow and it just was a bippity boppity rhyming. And so I think really what we have to be mindful of is that both points, there's oppression and privilege in both of those messages, and it was for that time. So with mumbo rap now, as we say, or trap rap now, it's important to be mindful of the oppression and privilege that's different for beings now versus the oppression and privilege that was current during the message. And if we are open to sitting down and having that conversation after doing that identification, we may have more open cross-generational conversations about hip hop and how it's been healing to us across generations, instead of a lot of back and forth about, well, you're doing this wrong, well, you're doing this wrong. And then we never have a healing conversation, right? So
hey,
the third.
Before you move on from oppression and privilege, so there's been a question about what does privilege really look like for Black people? And so I think that's such a good question. One, because whenever we're talking about oppression and privilege, we often, kind of put oppression with Black people, and then the privilege goes with other cultural groups. So when you say in the hip hop culture, and for Black people specifically, what does that privilege look like, and what does that mean?
Okay, so I always like to start with myself and then go outward. So for me, privilege is being able to speak in this moment about this topic, and being able to have that knowledge. This is a privileged point because everyone may not have this opportunity or this knowledge. So this is a privilege point. The privilege of knowing hip hop lyrics, that is a privilege, and being able to feel that, because there's a difference between knowing a lyric and feeling a lyric. And I think Black people have that privilege of being able to just automatically connect to it because of the melanin that is within us, that rhythm, that ancestral rhythm that resides within us. That is a privilege. It is a privilege for us to be able to learn and grow outside of the narrative of, oh, we started from slavery, and hip hop kind of being the conduit to that. It's a privilege to see ourselves as creators, as artists, as growers, as healers. That is a privilege. And I think Dr. Haynes, that is a great point, that oftentimes we automatically associate and link people of African descent with oppression. And that's not always the case. Yes, we've experienced that in this space and place called the United States of America and across the diaspora. And we also have so much privilege that we've been resilient through to create. And I think that's privilege in itself, to be able to create in the midst of the time and place that we've been placed in. That's privilege. And I think that's some divine destinies type of things too. So those are some examples of privilege. And if there's some follow-up questions, please feel free to ask those.
So yes, please put them in the comments. We are monitoring comments both on Zoom and on Facebook Live. So if you have comments, put them down, and I'll make sure to get them so that Dr. Davis can enlighten us some more. But we cut you in the middle of your tips, and so I think you were on number 3.
Yes. So number 3 is identify your feelings. And you want to do that through metaphors, images, sensory experiences. Because I know for a part of my journey, a lot of my consumption of music was through music videos, because I was the Rap City era, 106 in Park era. So it was important to know the videos, because then you had to learn the dances through the videos, right? So I knew when Nelly's Hot in Here started coming on and the screen started going like this, it started unfolding, that the chicken head was about to go wild, okay? And if you're not from the Midwest, you may not know what the chicken head is. I'm not gonna give you a demonstration today. But go look.
I was ready for you to bust it out. What?
Go look up Nelly's Hot in Here video. You'll get a demonstration. But when that came on, I immediately felt joy and pride, because it was like someone from my area, not necessarily Kansas City, Missouri, but someone from Missouri made it to a point and put our culture on a way where everybody's doing it. So it's important to identify with your feelings. And then when I heard, for instance, Eve's Love is Blind, I thought about experiences of domestic violence that I witnessed, and like, oh, I'm not alone. And then I also felt the sadness that stemmed from experiencing those. So music, again, with us, the privilege that we have is the ability to connect through feeling and emotion, because that rhythm is within us. And so it's important to identify any emotions that come up as you are listening, watching, consuming the music that you are in tune with at this point. And then this is the point where I typically say, if your emotions get too overwhelming for you, step 3 is typically the point where you need to assess, is this a just for me or no? And when I say that, what I'm saying is this a process that's just for you to go through by yourself, or do you need to bring some support into your tribe? And your healers may look different. So you may want to get a psychologist who practices traditional therapy. You may want to get a spiritual healer. And that's something that at this point that you really want to start thinking about based on the emotions that are stemming from the music you're listening to.
So let me put a pin right there, because you brought up something really important.
Because I'll keep going.
So you talked about that this being the point that you may need to add some more people to your tribe. And I love how you call it the tribe. I have my own tribe of people too. But how do you know? So, we say like emotions getting too strong, emotions are this. What are those signs? What's those tips, those things that let you know, the signal that say, hey, you know what? I might need to bring in some extra support in my tribe.
That is a great question. Pay attention to your playlist, your daily playlist, right? So for me, and then also for clients that I've worked through using hip hop, we had to notice the cycles and the loops, the musical loops that we get ourselves into. And so if we are in, let's say, a high energy space, because I don't always want to use low energy. If we're in a high energy space and we're feeling great, and we start our day off with Lizzo Juice, it ain't my fault that I'm out here getting, we're just jumping and moving, and we do that every day, we're more likely to then enter into our day from an enlightened, empowered type of standpoint, right? Versus if we're starting from a little Boosie Set It Off, type of song every morning, we may go into our day with a little bit more let's say defensive interaction than most days.
It's a different energy than Lizzo.
It's a different energy, right? So we might have some knuck if you buck type of energy if we start every day with Little Boosie. And so paying attention to the music that you're gravitating towards every day. And if you're listening to the lyrics and it's saying, I'm lonely, I don't have what I need. If those are constant themes in the music, which is a great segue to the next step, that is a way for you also to say, well, you know what? Yesterday I listened to this song and I felt this way and I couldn't get through the day and I kept listening to this song. So maybe if I put I listen to Nappy Roots Good Day. That's like my alarm. It's gonna be a good day. So like I have to start my day with that song. And I pay attention to, okay, well, I started my day with this song yesterday. It went well. This is how I felt when I heard this alarm go off. It's important to be mindful of what are you feeling and how that's on consistent patterns. And so that's a good tip. And I don't want to go in circles because I know sometimes I may do that. Secondly, you also want to ask your friends. Ask your friends, hey, what music are you listening to now? How are you noticing music impacting your mood? Do you think it impacts your mood? And that way, sometimes we go through experiences thinking that we're isolated. And oftentimes that may not be the case. It may just be that we've created an experience of isolation because that is our comfort zone. And so sometimes, sharing a song can open up a segue of conversation that then also will give you the support that you need as well. So sometimes my friends, they've learned that I communicate through music. And so sometimes I'll get a random text like, hey, send me a song that describes your mood for today. And then I could send them a song like, oh, okay, this is my song for today. Or I'll ask somebody, hey, send me an album that you listen to. And so it becomes a great way to check in with other people as well as yourself too.
I think you made a good point, and some people in our audience are really resonating with that thought about paying attention to what you're listening to as being an indicator of how you're feeling, or being a way to connect with how you're feeling. Because I've definitely been in those places where I had patterns of certain type of music, and looking back as you're talking, I'm like, oh wow, I should have been able to connect it in that period of time when I was listening to a certain type of music. That may not have been the best thing. But so I think that that's a good point, that we don't always think about really paying attention to the patterns of songs that we're listening to. So I like that as being a tip to think about, like, that's a way to identify that maybe we need some more support, or maybe we need someone to help us break that pattern. So I like how you're like, hey, send me your album, send me something you're listening to so that I can break a pattern, because I feel myself in this place where I'm going to need a little help getting out of. So this is good stuff. I hope that and I think we stopped you again.
It's okay.
You're on 4 now. I'm sorry.
Yep, but you know what? That was a great segue to number 4, because number 4 is notice themes in the song that connect with themes in your reality. And with that, it's important to notice your themes before you try to connect other people's themes, because then you could get crossed and you'll start comparing yourselves, or it could become easy to say, well, that's not what I got from that song. Am I wrong? And so it's important to connect your themes personally. Do that with yourself. And so, for instance, I'm gonna go back to Quiet Storm remix. When I heard Little Kim rapping and she said, I put 100% in every line that I drop. For me, that was like, oh, okay. So at that time I was a big, and I always probably will be, nerd or lover of school. And so for me, it was like, so it's not an issue for me to be that way. It's not a problem for me to be a little bit like obsessive, or like, oh, okay, this is what has to be like this, or it's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in that. And sometimes, other people may hear a lyric and think something totally different. And so it's important to connect the themes in the songs to your reality. And then the 5th one is listen for positive messages that promote positive change. And again, that's for you, because if you try to funnel your life through everybody else's lens, you will not live your life. You will live the life of everyone else around you. And then you'll look up and be like, oh my God, where's my life? So really work hard on saying, okay, this lyric meant this to me, and this is how I heard this lyric. That's the beauty of rap music, really, and in hip hop culture, is that it goes from one form of expression that can be transformed and transmuted into many expressions based on the listener. And so utilize your privilege of being able to pull out positive messages for you. And then lastly, you want to identify ways in which you can produce this positive change in your reality and then act on it. So for me, again, that Quiet Storm remix, I put 100% in every line that I drop. That's an affirmation for me. Like, I put 100% in every line that I drop. Every time that I'm doing something, I hear that song come up, or I may hear Boosie Set It Off, because I work on transmuting that energy into like setting it off in a great way. So I may also hear I'm about to set it off, or bitch can't do it like me. Nope. So like, it may be all kind of different songs. And I've realized that I live my life through lyrics. And I create like these playlists in my mind that really amp me up and have me feeling like great. I know everybody know when you hear 9-9 taking over, what Cash Money taking over for the 9-9 to 2000, you know that the energy that precedes that breakdown, that's gonna follow once that bass hits, is gonna be live, crunking in action, right? And so I think it's time for us to, yes, realize that, also start using that actively for our healing, because that energy that comes up when Cash Money takes over for the 9-9 and 2000 is the same energy you could use to do radical self-care and check off that thing that maybe hasn't been comfortable to do. Maybe you need to start your days off with some Cash Money, and you got the block on fire. What's, have you seen that meme where they use the lyrics to Cash Money song? Like, use those songs. Think back to the playlist of your teenage years when you were just out and having all the fun, because we could get caught up in our adult lives and really not remember good times. We could get caught in a loop of, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to get this done. But let's have fun while we're doing it. And I think we've created hip hop as the ultimate culture to use rap music. If you want to get into DJing, get you some vinyl. Oh my God, it feels so good to take vinyl out and put it on a record player and just have an active role in the music that you're hearing. So just find different ways of interacting with your music that helps facilitate your healing. Yeah, I'm gonna put a pin there for myself, and then we can go forward. I don't know if there's any comments or questions in the chat.
We do have some questions, but I'm just telling you, every time a versus comes out that is from my childhood. So the last one was Brandy and Monica that really resonated. I had to go download all that music. So now you're gonna make me go and download some more music that I remember, but maybe hadn't been in my playlist lately, just because you mentioned it right now. So I'm glad I paid for the Apple Music subscription for one more month so I can get some good downloads in.
Go ahead, amp your library up.
Amp my library back up. But you mentioned a couple of terms that I want to just get some clarification on. So you talk about radical self-care. Now we hear about self-care quite often, but what is the radical piece?
So the radical piece, because yes, we have seen self-care as a luxury, or you have to spend all this money to engage in it. Radical self-care is, what are the things that I may be avoiding that will help serve me well? So for me, I know that I have a to-do list every day. And some days I avoid my to-do list. I'm not going to tell you no stories. So for me, radical self-care is literally waking up and saying, today I am intending to actively work through my slay list. I had to even change it from to-do list to a slay list to make me feel a little bit better about all the things that are on that list. So for me, it was one, language. I'm really big on language. So changing to-do list. I don't have to have a to-do list because everybody else has a to-do list. I want to have a slay list. And so language, also, like I said, doing those things that you need to do. I need a pedicure. I don't have to go spend no money to go get a pedicure. I got some polish and I have some polish remover. Radical self-care is doing that in that moment and not saying, because I need to get to the shop and I don't have time or I don't have resources, I can't get my pedicure. And because I can't get my pedicure, I'm not able to do the things that I want. And because I'm not, so you see how it can just go in a cycle. So radical self-care is, in this moment, what is it that I need and what is it that I have that can meet together to create me actually fulfilling that goal?
That's awesome. So not avoiding those things that you need to do. That's good information, especially since I have been avoiding a few things on my slay list. That's gonna be. I'm gonna steal that. Just be aware that when you hear me use it, I will definitely cite you and give you your props. But I'm gonna steal that one. We do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First one is, what do you suggest when people focus on the pain and the struggle in the song rather than the solution? And I think you start talking about taking that energy and changing it to someone else. But what happens when someone gets stuck and you can't take that energy and change it into the positive.
Oh, yes. So for that, okay, I can set my iPad down because I'm done with like my scripted notes that I took down. Now it can just be off the script. So I mentioned Set It Off, right? And so I could give you all a little bit of tea. So Set It Off I've been a Boosie fan for a very long time. And when I started being a little Boosie fan, I probably was where you are, what you're saying, identifying with the pain and the struggle of the song more so than transmuting that energy of the song. So when I was listening to Little Boosie initially, it was because I was angry. It was because I did want to set a whole bunch of stuff off. And then it took a lot of things happened my senior year in college. I'm realizing. So I was saying my senior year undergrad, I noticed like that was a very pivotal year because it was like, what's next? Graduation for many people was just a pivotal year. It's like, what's next after this? What am I going to do? I knew that I wanted to do graduate school. It was like, what is this going to look like? And so there were some instances that took place where I wanted to set some things off. And because I was in the mindset of what is next, I could not set them off in the way that I wanted to set them off, if you're catching my drift, okay? So I used to meditate and sometimes still have to meditate to Little Boosie Set It Off. And some people may be like, well, how do you get calm and serene to that? And it's because that music helps me to identify with the anger. And a lot of times we try to avoid the anger that is within us. And by doing that, you also then avoid all of the emotions that are under anger. So anger is like the tip of the iceberg, and all of the emotions that under is the ones that we really have to get to. That's the root that we have to get under. So I would sit and I would listen to that, and I would allow all the anger to rise up. And when I felt like so angry, I would imagine myself walking across the stage as Dr. Davis. I would imagine myself seeing my first client. I would imagine myself speaking, doing like speaking engagements like this. I would imagine myself doing all the things that I wanted to do, and then ask myself, now, which one is more important?
Wow.
And so using that as a form of meditation, and I'm excited because I know one of the questions are going to be what's next. So these are some things that I'm going to just be talking more about and helping more people work through, because it's helped me so much to transmute energy in that way, because it's a reason why we gravitate towards those lyrics. It's our spirit telling us there's something that we must work on. And so I don't think we just need to avoid that music altogether. I think that there's work that we can do with that music to transmute the energy that's behind that music for us.
So our spirit can be attracted to certain music because it's telling us that this is something you need to be working on. And so it's not just that for us to listen to it or to get stuck in that pattern, but to really do the work. The music should be the catalyst for you to do the work to get to the healing.
Yes, Iyanla, do the work.
No, ma'am, Alexis. That's what.
Well, Alexis too. Yes, do the work. Thank you.
So, and then we had another question on the other live, and so I hope they put it back. But it had to do with using music to connect with your children, and how do you suggest that people do that? And I may be missing a piece of the question, so I hope that person rejoins us and puts it in there if I did. But basically, how would you suggest that we use music to connect with our kids?
Yes. First, understand our connection with music. I'm going to give, again, if you noticed by now, I love doing round the mountain conversations. So first, understand our connection with music. When we think of rappers, sometimes we don't think of them as healers. We don't think of artists as healers, right? But then when you think of griots or griots, West African griots, who traveled the continent to tell the story of their tribes through poetry, art, spoken word. What are rappers? They are healers. They are griots. They are griots to understand each other, to understand the emotions that some of us are going through that may not be as bold enough to say out loud. And so first understand it in that perspective. See them as healers and that they have the ability to heal. A lot of the issues that we have with hip hop, and we've internalized that oppression, is the outside world's view of the culture. So when hip hop first started, the culture first started, and rap music was coming up, we had political officials down in hip hop culture, specifically rap music. We had, everybody saying this is just so bad. This is so bad. We shouldn't talk about this. So be mindful of not internalizing that viewpoint of a certain genre of music, because you may be closing out an opportunity to have a conversation with your child if you don't do that. So first, I want to kind of start with some perspective shifting that we could do. And then secondly, I have been an aunt who has lived away from my hometown for a large part of my nieces and nephews' life because of my career, because of me just wanting to explore the world. So whenever I go home, whenever I talk to them, one of the main questions I'm asking them is, what are you listening to now? And let's listen to the song. And I like to coin myself as the cool TT. So I just let them play, whatever they want to play. And then they always know that it's going to come back with a follow-up. The TT is going to have a song to add to the playlist that's going to kind of counteract some type of song. But after we listen, I ask them, so what does that mean to you? Why do you like that song right now? Is that like the common theme of the music you're listening to right now? So I'm working through those steps, but I'm asking them in a way that they're open to talk to me about it. And from that, I've gotten so much information from them that hopefully they're not watching, so they won't know my secret, but I think they picked up on it by now. But I've gotten so much information just through asking them, what are you listening to now? As an assistant professor, I would ask my students, hey, like, what is the music that you're listening to now? And that would help me know where my students' mindset were, because it's difficult to come into a classroom and teach to a whole bunch of students who may be in a I'm so lonely Akon mood, right? Like, I need to know that, so then I could teach from that narrative, like, okay, hey, let's get in our circle and let's teach and let's learn from the circle today versus the classroom setting. So just having that conversation and being open to say, hey, what are you listening to? And if there's something that you are repulsed by, let me say this, because I was a child who had my CD player listening to Little John and the East Side Boys and got my CD chunked out the window. So, so let me also say this. Before you chuck the CD out the window, you may want to take a moment to place yourself back into your 13-year-old shoes and realize how you felt in that moment when you were scolded for something that was identity formation for you. And so I think in that moment, ask, well, why are you gravitated towards this lyric? That I felt this emotion when I heard this lyric. How did you feel when you hear this lyric? Why do you think there's difference between our emotions? And so I think by asking those questions that are open-ended and not necessarily, do you know how this music makes you feel? Do you know that this music is da 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 da? Like that then shuts anyone down, let alone children, from wanting to express the reason behind or the energy behind why they're listening to that music.
I mean, you see some hearts in the comments, and people are really talking about that. I think that's just a shift for parents. I also am the cool TT. My nephew is a little young, so he's still kind of listening to Paw Patrol and all of that. But it is a difference in the perspective into talking to your kids from, why are you listening to this in a kind of scolding and lecturing way, to really trying to understand, what do they hear, what does that make, how does that make them feel? But also I love the way that you talk about being honest with how that song or those lyrics made you feel, so that you were able to say, when I heard this lyric, I felt this way. And so why are these feelings different? And I think lots of parents, when WAP came out earlier this summer or this fall, whenever you want to call it, there were a lot of parents who had to have conversations with kids about, why are you listening to this particular lyrics, and do you know what this means? And so that's just an important, just a different strategy of taking, where you don't shut them down, but you open up conversation and dialogue with your kids about music. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. And if I might, just a quick tidbit on the WAP, because that's a great example I could use. So for instance, if you did feel some repulsion towards WAP, it's a lot of energy in that song. I'm not going to say anything. There's a lot of energy in that song. One technique I would suggest is, let's say because when I hear WAP, for me, I think of Uncle Luke. I don't know why. I just think of Uncle Luke. So that's just what I think of. So, that may also be a great moment to go back and think of, like, what does that make me think of, and why do I think that makes me think of that? And then use that to have a conversation. You may not want to let your child listen to any Uncle Luke. You may want to use that as a conversation. So back in this generation, this is what Uncle Luke was. And let's say you want to shift the narrative of your child. You don't want them listening to WAP. You may want to use Uncle Luke to say, well, when I listened to this, it made me want to, as my aunt would say, hully gully across the floor all the time. And for me, that wasn't the best narrative. I realized it got me X, Y, and Z. How do you think you would be explaining WAP to your children? So kind of allowing yourself to be not necessarily, like you said, Tiffany, Dr. Haynes, in a scolding view, but in a hey, I hear this, I feel this. This is kind of what I was going through, and this is the musical time of my age group where you are. Let's talk about this. Like, just, I think in our community, that's what we need during this time, is how to talk to each other, especially since we are confined in with each other. It's important.
And letting that music be something that connects you and not necessarily divides you. And yes. I remember at the very beginning of this conversation, you talked about people who say, your music was this music is so much better. And the people who get into the arguments about what genre, what decade had the best music. Let the music be something that brings you together and not divides you. First, somebody wants to know what Hully Gully is.
Twerking. My aunt used to say, y'all just be hully gullying all the time, just showing all your stuff.
And then we have some other people. Some people in our comments are just sharing their experiences with connecting with their kids via music. And we won't be able to read all the comments, but there are some great comments about how they've been using it and to address things, to talk with their kids. So I think that that's really resonating with people that we have on here with us. So, Dr. Davis, you have been dropping these gems about how we can use hip hop for healing and connecting with the lyrics and being open to feeling the feelings when we have this music. What are you doing next? Where is this going? Where's this work going? Have you reached the pinnacle of what you're going to be doing? You got some more? What's going to be happening?
Yes, I have some more. I think my life is going to be a continuous pinnacle. I just want a peak lifestyle. So, yes. So, yes, this month I am doing a Healing the Undercover Overlover course, Releasing Codependency. And so just thinking about music, if you're realizing that you're in a loop, like we talked about, you may want to look into this course about your codependency with music, and then that may uncover some other things. I'm also going to be working with artists, and that stems from, if you are a rapper, singer, producer, DJ, to actually work through these steps, because my goal is to eventually be working with artists to then help them know the impact of their music, to divvy that out and do courses like these with their fans, because it's important. Could you imagine if we had a course with one of our favorite artists that talked about, the emotional process of going through their song, the emotional process of listening to their song, and how you can continuously use their album, right? So those are things that I'm wanting to do and am launching. So if you go over to www.bblvkjewel.com, you can check out the spiritual practice I launched, which is Black Moon Healing Services, with more information about some of those packages. You can head over to Instagram and follow us on there for the course information. It is on Eventbrite. And just keep in tune, because our mantra is watch us grow out loud. So I'm just going to keep growing out loud and keep sharing my growth with everyone else. So hopefully it'll just become a ladder for growth and healing for all people of African descent. So
now, Dr. Davis, you got to give us how to contact you one more time, because you said that quick, because you just rolled off your tongue. So slow it down for us and give us your website and your Instagram again so we can connect.
I definitely will. So www.bblvk, that's two B's, a L, a V, and a K, that's Black, Jewel, JEWEL.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Black Jewel, BBLVK, JEWEL, net flew in my face. Sorry, y'all. On Facebook, you can follow me at Alexis Davis, ALEXIS Davis, and you can like the Black Jewel page on Facebook as well.
I think our team is right. Is going to put that in the comments on Facebook for people. But it's Black Jewel everywhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, they got it in the comments for us so that we can connect with you. There was a question about hip hop or music that you would suggest for processing trauma.
Oh, yes. The first album that came up, now two. The first album that came up is Boogie, not Boogie with the Hoodie, BOOGIE, Boogie from Compton. He dropped this, I think, January 25th, if I'm not mistaken, 2018. Everything's for Sale. So in that album, there's the first song, Tired / Reflections. It talks about someone looking in the mirror and really being like tired of what they see, and like all the things that they're seeing, and realizing that the person that's been standing in their way is not necessarily the trauma they've experienced, but the narrative and the person they've held on to because of that. So that album is really great. I would always suggest Londrell. He's a meditative type of artist, and so his albums are always bomb. The Feels is the album that I would suggest, because he literally talks about depression, he talks about anxiety, and he talks about it from a way of, this is what you may be experiencing, breathe in this way. So it's like a meditation album, but it's a hip-hop album. So Londrell and Boogie, though, I would suggest you starting there, and those two will really help you. Boogie, to help you understand those emotions. You don't want to replay that every day. You want to listen to that, set some time out, listen to Boogie, Everything's for Sale. And then after you listen to that, I would suggest listening to Londrell. Any of his albums, you cannot go wrong. And then listen to Londrell on replay.
Okay, so you gave us some tips. I like how they just rolled off. You like, I know exactly who to tell you to go talk to about this. Dr. Davis, this has been such a treat, as I knew it would be. The opportunity to just hear you talk about music and how we connect to music and how we can heal through hip hop. So I know you can't see the comments, but there's so many people here who are glad to be able to put a name to it. We've always loved music, but now we're not just music lovers. We are healing through hip hop. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us on today. I also cannot let this end without mentioning that this week is Mental Illness Awareness Week. It is our time that we show people who may be dealing with mental health issues that we see them, we support them, and we're here to help. So this is a great time to have this conversation. So I encourage everyone to take some time out this week to think about their own emotional wellness, but also the emotional wellness of those around us. I also want to give a shout out to some of the devastating divas of Delta Sigma Theta who are all in our comments today, giving you love and support. So just want to make sure that you knew that the sorors were here, and they are saying how much they enjoyed your conversation. Again, thank you, Dr. Davis. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Holmes to close us out.
Thank you.
Yes, this is just wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Thank you for moderating, Dr. Haynes. This was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So for those of you all that are watching, please know that the replay, of course, will be on Facebook. For those of you all on Zoom that may not have a Facebook page, please know that this will be uploaded to our YouTube page, right? So Dr. Davis actually is a part of this ongoing series. So she's helping us to get this out on social media, get it out on YouTube. So Dr. Davis, our YouTube page is Arkansas AABPP, correct?
Yes. So you can search AABPP and it will pop up. It'll have the logo, which is black in the state of Arkansas, and it'll also say Arkansas Association of Black psychology professionals.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this is great. So this is going to be out there so people can continue to get this knowledge. I mean, it was so many people. You dropped all of those songs that was taking me back. Yeah, my playlist may be modified a little bit, like Dr. Haynes was saying. So this is wonderful. This is wonderful. I know people will continue to feed on this knowledge as we kind of go throughout the month and so forth, since this will always be out there on Facebook and YouTube. So please, for those of you all that are watching, please know that this conversation is going to continue, this Mindful Minute Conversation series. So each Monday on our Facebook page, we will release information, pre-recorded sessions that address these sorts of issues. So again, it'll be on Facebook, but it'll also be released on our YouTube channel. So for the rest of this month of November, of October, we'll also have some information for couples that'll be released, and I think we have some tips for parents, I believe, that may have already been released. I know Dr. Davis has really been helping us with that. And in November, though, our next live will be focusing on the role of grandparents during the pandemic. So we have Mr. Jesse Gatewood, who I know a lot of folks in the community know Mr. Gatewood. So we're glad that he's going to come on November 2nd, the first Monday in November, to talk about the role of grandparents during the pandemic. That's just going to be an important conversation. And then we're going to release some information about holiday stress and tips for couples. In December, our series is going to focus on the use of visual arts for coping with COVID-19 and racism. And we'll have another panel discussion release that's going to talk about the use of literary arts for coping with COVID-19 and racism. So if you all notice, we're coming at it from a lot of different angles. Tonight, we talked about hip hop, so that's wonderful. We're talking about navigating and coping with holiday stress, tips for couples, the role of grandparents, visual arts, literary arts. So we just want to just get a lot of information out there that gives people practical tips for how to cope with the stress of this time, and then how to do it in a way that is engaging and provides education as well. So I know from my perspective tonight, I felt like it was very informative and also engaging. So thank you very much. Thank you for all who joined tonight. And thank you again to Dr. Haynes and Dr. Davis for tonight's live. We appreciate it.